I am the best in the world at buying off-market, distressed, single-family assets in Richmond, Virginia that you can repurpose and turn into Section 8. Like, I don't know how to be more nuanced than that or more niche. I figured out very quickly what I'm very, 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 very good at and where I can be dominant. And I have a very narrow lane. And because of that narrow lane, I have been able to get really good inside of it.
You're listening to Let Me Speak to a Manager with Frank Cava and Ian Matthews.
What a crock of shit.
Yeah, that was hot mic, Sam.
It's 30 minutes away. I'll be there in 10.
Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
Frankie!
Ian, you son of a bitch. You alpha, take charge, son of a bitch.
If you are watching on YouTube, you'll see that Frank is layered up today. He looks like he's been outfitted by LL Bean. He's got at least 3 to 6 layers on.
I have on 3 layers. I have on an undershirt by Legends. I have a Brunello Cucinelli top, a sweater, and then I bought a shacket.
I do enjoy a good jacket, but I only own like 2 of them, and I wear them everywhere, and I don't layer them up. They are not specific to an outfit the way you are. Frank likes to dress himself up like an American Girl doll. He's got a personal stylist that comes to the house and brings boxes of stuff on that he likes to try on, and it just brings him back to his childhood of playing with Barbie dolls with his brother.
If anybody asks what it's like to be an entrepreneur, the upside of being an entrepreneur is for the entire part of your week, you get to be in charge and do whatever you want. You can enjoy your entire week. These are the 2 hours that are the exception in my week. If I can get my balls broken constantly, I don't get paid for this.
It keeps you humble. You know, you boss people around all goddamn
That's what
week.
I need the most arrogant
People around all freaking week, you know, big swinging D, Frank Cava. You need a little bit of humble pie every once in a while.
That's what I need.
So you just got back. Speaking of humble pie, you just got back from your private jet trip out to a real estate conference last week. How was that?
For those of you listening, I did not take a private jet. I've only done that a couple times. And one week we got a note from Paxson that said, hey, if you're going to talk about a private jet, you probably should on the same episode talk about firing a bunch of people. It really doesn't land with your audience.
That did hit home pretty well.
We haven't done it since. So I went to a conference out in Arizona.
The same Jeff Paxson that still hasn't cashed the checks we sent him in 2024 and the bank wouldn't let him, so he needs you to resend. That one?
Him.
That's shocking. That's shocking. My former college roommate hasn't cashed $12,000 in checks yet from 2 years ago.
More?
Yeah, probably more. We should just keep that as a management bonus for him. Like we should change the terms of the next agreement so that if he doesn't cash within 12 months, you and I get to spend it on wine.
100%.
Yeah, let's put that in the bylaws.
We don't issue his checks. We just put it in a petty cash account. When he calls us, we just, all right, here, 30 days, we'll send it.
Also, why put it in the bylaws? Let's just tell him that those were cash, and he'll be like, oh, sorry for bothering you guys. That'll be it.
Exactly.
Then we buy the wine.
Hopefully this is the one episode he skips. So yeah. I go to this conference. It's called IMN, and it's Internet Marketing Network or something along those lines is the title of it. And they have all kinds of different topics. So we've talked here about this conference. We get kind of nuggets and kind of tidbits from the conference. When I first started going to the conference almost 10 years ago, I brought Ian, I think in year 2 or 3. So this is a conference where I was invited by some industry folks. They're into banking, and there's overlap and parallels with what we do in real estate investing. And they have 2 conferences a year. They have one in Miami in May, and they have one in Scottsdale in December. Now, I had a conflict for the first 9 years that I couldn't go to the one in Scottsdale because I had another event. So this is the first time I ever went to Scottsdale. But as a setup to this, what I'll tell you is I now know, 50 to 100 people at this conference. And I know them from different parts of doing the job, but I'm not someone who loves going to conferences. I just don't. I'm kind of an extrovert at work, and I'm kind of an introvert at home. So I feel uncomfortable, or it's not my best place. Like I'm a one-on-one or a small group guy. I'm not a big group kind of a guy. So to that end, like going to conferences are a little bit uncomfortable for me as a setup. Now, I will tell you before we get into the details, Phoenix in December is freaking awesome. It's out west. It's kind of like California. There's heaters everywhere. It's hot during the day and cold at night. It is just spectacular. But
Also awesome. Miami in May, also awesome.
Miami is a little hot.
I enjoyed it. I had a good time.
Nice.
That was a nice trip.
Yeah, it's a good trip.
So the first one you ever went to was 2015?
It was 15 or 16. I think it might have been 16.
And why did you go to it? Did someone recommend it to you?
Yeah, so Sammy the Bull, the guy from Baltimore, is a lender, and I'm not a lender. So he goes, like, I was like, where do smart people hang out? He goes, here, go to this conference. So the first year I went, there were some people I knew from the mastermind that I was in, but it was a lot of people from Wall Street, a lot of bankers. Everybody was in, I wore jeans. Everybody was in suits. It was a very different type of a thing. And if you ever seen people from Wall Street, there's a couple of giveaways you're from Wall Street. Besides the fact you think you fucking know everything, but you don't get that till you talk to them. But the two things are, number one, they all wear blue suits, and they all kind of have like slightly long hair. Like if Ian's hair went back a little bit and kind of touched his shoulders, you know, kind of like the Gordon Gekko look, they all kind of look like that. So it's a very different crowd. And the way that I look at Wall Street is those are some of the smartest people in America who make their way there. It's an intimidating place to be.
So the first one you went to, you know, a handful of people from a mastermind. It's from what I remember, it's like a 3-day event, was it?
Yeah,
2-day
exactly.
event, 3-day?
Yep.
Yeah, 3-day event. So you go to this thing, you know, you pay whatever, a few $1,000 to get into the thing. You got to get a hotel. It's a real expense. And you get I remember I got like a little outline of different rooms that I could pop into to watch different. Sometimes they have 3 or 4 people speaking at one time and you choose which one you go sit in on. Sometimes it's the whole group goes to one thing. So when you went to that thing that first time, I imagine there was a lot of like standing around looking at your phone because you don't know a lot of people, and like it's probably a little awkward the first time you go.
And there's a little bit of overwhelm, right? Like, what do you do? There's a lot of pressure. Like, I need to go to every one of these events, and you can't pick the wrong one. And like, what if there's 2 topics that are happening concurrently? Because they have like 3 or 4 rooms going at a time. I like 2 of these topics, so it's just kind of stressful because it's like you want to get the most out of it. You're out of the office, so there's like a stressful component of like making sure you have the perfect event.
Yeah, it's interesting. The event you took me to, that was, you know, probably, was that 5 months after I had left MBR. So I remember feeling that way too. I didn't know anyone, and 2, I wasn't even sure why I was there. You at least kind of knew you were there to find depth, but like people would ask me, and I didn't know whether I wanted to be an operator or an investor. So people would kind of ask, and I would say, I'm not quite sure why I'm here. I'm, you know, trying to see what opportunities are out there. And what was interesting for me is I didn't really have much to lose when I was there because I wasn't really quite sure why I was there. But one thing that trip did do for me is I left there thinking I'm an investor. I don't want to operate. I listened to everything going through that, and I was like, I'm not building a team. I'm not going through all the hassles that Frank goes through to build an operation. I'm going to pick and choose some things where I think I can add value as an investor. I'm going to raise capital and I'm going to invest. That's what I'm doing in real estate. So that I did get something out of that meeting, but I definitely was not comfortable. I hate those kind of networking meetings and, you know, trying to pick and choose where to go to and who to be social with. And even then, I had you to kind of introduce me to 30 people, and I still didn't love being there.
Yep. So I think the one thing Ian said with this a second ago that matters is, and if you remember, this is during a period of time where Ian he didn't want to, we've talked about this here. He didn't want to confront the fact that he was unemployed. So he just told people he was retired because it was a way to kind of, I'm in a transitional period, but nobody wants to say that. So he had a narrative that allowed him to dictate terms to other people until he figured out what he wanted to do with his time. But the point is, for him, he didn't really know what he wanted out of the conference, but I did. And if you go in with kind of clear expectations or outcomes, it's a lot easier to find them while you're there. And what you get from conferences is like, where are you going to get value? Is the value going to come from the panels? Is the value going to come from, like, the sales floor where everybody's got a booth? Is it going to come from dinners? Is it going to come from, going to the bar and talking to people? And it's a combination of all of those different things. But with time, you kind of understand, like, okay, now I go to 30% of the panels I could go to. Like, I've been there for 10 years. Like, there's nothing earth shattering. And if a panel sucks, I get up and leave and I go to a different panel or I go to the bar. Like, I don't hold myself to these incredible standards that I thought I had to go to before, because ultimately it's my time to pick and choose how I want to spend it.
We're going to get to this particular conference, but I am interested, going to this thing twice a year for 10 years. Can you remember some of these conferences going to and sitting in on one of those sitting in one of those panels, listening to people or listening to maybe a particular lender or an operator talking about something where for me, the best thing you can get out of those things is like 2 or 3 little, like, I'm going to do something about that when I get back. Can you remember like leaving one of those and thinking, I'm fired up, I'm changing direction in a certain area, or I'm going to go invest this way or get my team focused? Can you remember where you were like, yeah, 10 grand for this trip, the whole thing, all of it, worth it because I'm going to go apply this?
Yep. I can 100%. Like, if you want me to give you a list,
give me one. I'm interested in one specific one where you literally came back and were like, I'm changing direction based on what I heard. Even if it was 3 days of hearing the same thing over and over has me nervous or has me excited, where I literally am going to apply what I learned to my biz.
I'm going to enter into evidence 2 things. And they're very different, but I think it makes sense. One's macro. So what I do when I go to a conference is this. Like, I've got a cool wife. I dated a woman years ago. Ian knows her by name. She was very, very, very jealous. And whenever I was anywhere, she was always up my ass about what I was doing. My wife is the opposite. She could give a shit less about what I'm doing and lets me alone. So whenever I go to a conference, what I usually do is I get there a little bit early and I stay a day late. And I've had this conversation, I'll get into this in the second bullet point, but I had this conversation with a couple of different people while I was there. So this is my strategy when I go to a conference. The first thing is I try and clear my plate of all the bullshit and stuff I have to deal with at home. So the first few days before I leave, I make sure my email's caught up. I make sure I've had like one-on-ones with everybody on my team, because next week I'm going to be gone. I'm going to be out of the office. I don't have to deal with emergencies. The second thing I do when I go to a conference is I lean in. I go to the conference to be at the conference. So I'll usually do a couple of calls, but typically I'll talk to Carla 2 or 3 times. I might talk to a department head 1 or 2 times. But that's about it. Like, I'll talk to Carla almost every day, but everybody else I'll talk to maybe once or twice for the course of the week. The third thing I do is I go to the conference. And then the fourth thing I do is I don't rush home. And this is what comes into kind of having the right partner at home. The day after the conference, I go through, I find a coffee shop or someplace I want to sit, and I go through all of my notes. And I say, are there anything in these notes I need to take action on? Is it immediate action? Is it long-term follow-up action? Is it something I need to present to my team? What is it? And you don't know what you're going to get. So when you go to a conference, it's kind of like collecting dots. And you never know how those dots are going to all connect or where it's going to be meaningful. But the most important thing for me is like, okay, do I have short-term, immediate, and long-term things to deal with? And I break them into those 3 categories, and then I go deal with them. So like in some instances, I'm dealing with it while I'm at the conference. I made a relationship with this woman at the conference. She's putting me in touch with someone who's going to get me like the cheapest possible internet solution for all my ADUs, like little things like that. But I like wanted to make sure like I got those things taken care of, and I have it broken into immediate, short-term, long-term. So that's kind of how I look at a conference in general, anyone I go to. So I'll stop there and see if you have thoughts.
I don't have thoughts. I love the way you broke that down. And you kind of get that over 15 years of going to conferences. You've landed on something. There was probably times where you were rushing in to get to the beginning and rushing out with your flight, and you've kind of realized that that's not productive, because the whole idea of going to this is to get some return on it, to get something out of it, right? Even if it's an aha or one thing you change. But I love that. I love that you've got kind of a process that goes through it. But go back to my original question. Can you think of one where you went to that particular meeting and you had an oh crap moment that it was either bearish or bullish or something? It could be a new way to do debt. What was it?
Yep. So I went to this conference with I'm going to use a very recent example. I went to this conference with a very, very real set of expectations. And my expectations are this. I'm building ADUs now. So it's a complicated process. I own the house in the front. I need to build an ADU in the back, and then I need to refinance the entire thing into a package. So to make the math really easy, the house is worth $350,000 that I currently own that's stabilized. I add an ADU that's $150,000, and then collectively the whole thing is worth $500,000. So there's a lot of moving parts and there's a lot of variability. The biggest variable that there is we set a value today, we go do the work, but then we appraise it on the back end when it's time to get secure debt, meaning a mortgage, and the value changes. So that's a big deal. And if it changes by 50 grand, which is a 10% move in the market, that means you got to come out of pocket with money that you didn't expect to. So it can screw up all of your plans. So I've been going to this conference enough where I know the following. The debt on the existing house is one kind of debt, securitized in a certain way. The debt on the house and the construction is another kind of debt. And then the third kind of debt is the house, the ADU, all packaged up with two different leases. That's a third kind of debt. And everybody underwrites it differently. So now I've been going to this conference long enough where I understand that it's not there's not a one size fits all or a one method process. But I had dinner with two different groups of people. And I was thinking I'd be one of like 60 people at these dinners. One night I was part of a 12-person dinner, and one night I was part of a 5-person dinner. The second night I had a bottle and a half, 2 bottles of wine with some friends. I had way too much wine. I thought I was going to be there with 40 people and I'd be able to fit in. And it turns out I was at a table with 4 people who work for a company and me, and I'm next to the CEO. And I was like, well, I had more wine than I should have. I'll just lead with that. And I told him, like, he's like, Frank, if you had a crystal ball, we as a lender can do anything. What do? He goes, I said, this would be it. I want a product where I understand it's 2 different loans, but I want a product where I don't have to redo an appraisal. And he asked me to explain it. And I explained it just like I did to you. And he goes, so is it okay if it's 2 closings? I said, 100%. And he goes, if we can build that for you when you have like a period of time, like 180 days, would that work? And I said, probably. So that's an enormous thing. So like that's something that I'm actively working on right this minute because it changes the relationship with everything we have with ADUs, and it takes one of the biggest risks out of the play. So it's like from that perspective, like what am I doing with it? Number one, I had the opportunity because I've been going to this meeting long enough. I ended up in the right spot with the right people, which is not how it started in the beginning, but through years of perseverance, I found the right group. And then the third thing was when someone asked, I had enough vocabulary from going to this that I knew how to pose it properly. And I was able to say, this is what I'm looking for. And I did this at 2 different dinners, and both people had different products or different things. They both said, we can work with that.
It's really it's really interesting, just conferences in general. And it kind of comes down to something. I'm having a discussion with a friend who's also an executive, a manager. And our take on this has been there's just not enough people that are willing to invest in their craft, invest in themselves, invest in getting better. I feel like so many people just get to a point and they think they're defined and that they're done, and they stop. Even take a person who's been in sales for 10, 15 years. You ask the average person who's been in sales for 10 years, when's the last sales book you read? And they stare at you blankly. Like they just stopped reading sales books. Like they reached some magical level and they just quit investing. But things like conferences, things like You hire coaches, things like you go to these masterminds. There's no MBA you can go get that can really teach you to do what Frank's built, what he's put together. There's certainly, I can tell you 5-on-4 group, making money the way I make money with video programs, training programs, consulting, all that. I would not have learned that going to some Ivy League MBA because the people teaching you have never done that shit. They've never and one thing I know for certain, whenever I was stuck, Frankie, with 5-on-4 group or with my industrial real estate business, whenever I was stuck, it's because I was trying to learn on the cheap. I was trying to hunt and peck on YouTube. I was trying to Google search my way to finding answers. Like whenever I've had big breakthroughs, it's when I've spent money on a consultant or I've gone to some conference or I've gotten on a plane and gone and looked at things with my own eyes. I can still remember like a 2-day trip I did with my industrial real estate where he just took me and showed me like 15 properties and just being in the car with him for a couple days, talking about how these things are debt financed, talking about how people raise capital for them, how the different REITs look at those properties when they sell it. It was an investment. I spent a few $1,000s to go do that trip. It was on my tab, but I learned so much more than Google searching around and YouTubing how to buy industrial real estate. And so Frank spends more than the average bear, but he has a lot more on the line. But I can tell you, I know when Frank didn't have profits and he was still going to these things because what he had learned in 15 years of business working for a big home builder was good, but it wasn't enough on how to go build a business. That wouldn't have served you enough. You had to go get answers. And the only way to do that is to spend money on yourself. You got to invest if you want to return.
Tim Ferriss said something in the 4-Hour Work Week that I still remember to this day. And this isn't something it's not a brag or anything along those lines, but this is what I think I am. I am the best in the world at buying off-market, distressed, single-family assets in Richmond, Virginia that you can repurpose and turn into Section 8. Like, I don't know how to be more nuanced than that or more niche. And I don't think there's anybody better than me. Now, it's a really small lane. It's not like I'm saying I'm better than Michael Jordan at basketball. It's not that big of a claim. But the point is I figured out very quickly what I'm very, 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 very good at and where I can be dominant. And I have a very narrow lane. And because of that narrow lane, I have been able to get really good inside of it. Now, what Warren Buffett talks about, we talked about this on the Thanksgiving letter. He talks about, if I could give anybody advice, it would give yourself a punch card and understand what you're going to invest in. And you're only going to get so many bites at the apple. The upside of that is you're not spread out incredibly. You're looking at it really, really narrow. And because you're getting really narrow, you can get great there.
That's awesome. I love how narrow you got on that. In different terms, that's called the long tail, right? So if you think about the long tail, think about music and what the internet's done. In the 80s, it was really hard to become famous. It was really hard to make money in music because you're up against MTV and the radio. So you're up against Michael Jackson and, right, the whole world knows Michael Jackson and a handful of different bands. There wasn't a long tail. It was popular music was the top 100 and that was it. Now, because of the internet, there's this long tail on the demand curve where you can find a little tribe, right? We have a tribe on this podcast, right? It's growing, but it's small and it's nichey, right? Whatever it is, we're not trying to be everything to everybody. We're just kind of recording, and we've found this little weird long tail. And if you were to kind of just line up all the people that listen to this podcast in a room, it's kind of an eclectic group. It's kind of all over the place, but there's a tail to it, and we know what we want to do. I love how you describe what you're the best at in the world. That is awesome. And honestly, as you're saying that, I need to do a better job of that, even with 5-on-4 group, of what am I the best at in the world. And it would be narrow like that. If I really wanted to kind of hone down, it would be a narrow lane that I would choose. There's probably not many better in the world than me at eating chocolate covered pretzels with peanut butter. I mean, I would put myself up against just about anyone in the world, the top 1% at least.
In fairness, that's a much wider lane, and you're probably not as good as that as you think statistically. There's a lot of fat fucks out there that can eat.
There's some fat ass right now in Louisiana that's like, yeah, I'd like to see that, boy.
Yeah.
I go
you
through
just gave Lane Kiffin $6 so he'd come for NIL. All right, so I want to talk about something else. Okay, so Thanksgiving was a couple weeks behind us. I'm going to tell a story about leaning in and investing in your craft. So this is my thought process on investing in your craft. And I don't know how I got here. I don't know why I got here, but I got here. Somehow or another, I became a lifelong learner. So I was having a conversation. I'm going to leave all the names out of it. I was having a conversation with my sister during Thanksgiving about somebody we both know from childhood. And this person was smarter than me as a kid and was smarter than me for most of their lives. But I was referencing this person and my sister's like, well, you're smarter now. And I was like, well, I don't know. She goes, no, it's not even close. She goes, think about how much time, money, and effort you put into growing. And she goes, and you're continuing it. And what I point out to Ian all the time is 97% of Warren Buffett's wealth came after the age of 65. And I'm 15 years away from that. Ian is 16 and a half years away from that. And he'd like to point out he's
much younger than Frank.
Yes. Ian's like my wife, constantly wants to show me how much younger he is. But the point of the story is I have put money into all these events and everyone has laughed at me at some point. Ian laughed at me at some points with this stuff. It's fine. But when you finally get value out of it, and if you have kind of an idea and you're making sure you're holding yourself accountable to actually getting value and valuing your time, it adds up. So like over the years, I went to Tony Robbins events and some of them have been more valuable than others, but I've gotten stuff out of it. I've gone to the mastermind groups. I've gone to all these different things. I pay money for coaches, a lot of money. Some of them have been a waste of time. I wrote a $50,000 check to this douchebag, like 12, 15 years ago. And Ian's like, you got to get the money back. And like 2 or 3 people texted me like, this guy's a schmuck. But I went all the way through that relationship with him. And at the very, very end, he introduced me to the mastermind that probably had the biggest impact on my career. And it was, if I hadn't made that investment, I don't know if I find that other thing. So they're not all perfect. They're not all straight lines up. But the point is, if you put yourself into these situations and you give yourself a chance to be open to listening and learning, you might get a nugget. And it's not necessarily the macro that you're going for, but it's those little nuggets. And then you know who you are. And if you know who you are, you say, this is the thing I need to pluck out of this. And this is going to help me get to where I want to go. Like as an example of this, Ian came and did a keynote speech for us at a mastermind. He didn't get paid. It's bullshit, but he didn't get paid. He flew all the way out there, but he made a relationship. And that relationship invited him to North Carolina. And then he goes to North Carolina, and that guy put him in touch with the guy that he helped build his program. Like completely and totally waste of time, with the exception of, if you look back, it's like that one relationship led to one other thing that led to something else. He connected the dots and he turned it into a business. And you never know where those things are going to come.
Really well said. Really well said. And I think if we're just talking for people who are investors, you know, we have a group of people that listen to this podcast that are investors. Yes, that's something Frank is really good at as an operator. It's also an area he doesn't put his money into much other than that, because he just said he's the best in the world at distressed properties in Richmond, Virginia. Okay. And I summarized it a little bit shorter than he did. But I ask him all the time, like I'll flip him a little screenshot of Google stock, which I have been heralding since 2018 on this podcast. I love the stock. And he's always like, yeah, looks good. But when Frank has another $100,000, he doesn't buy Google stock like me. Frank goes and puts it back into something he gets incredible returns at. He just doesn't have stock charts he can show me of how good it's all done, but he puts his money back into the thing that he is very expert in, right? And I'm kind of narrow in the stuff that I put my money into. I put it into a handful of stocks that I like. I put it into projects with Frank because I'm investing in Frank. It's not that I love ADUs. It's not that I like Richmond properties. I'm investing in Frank because I trust him. And if I were going to put money into my own real estate, it is always industrial, triple net real estate in 5 states in the Southeast with 10 to 15 year leases and very minimal landlord requirements. And I have very specific industrials that I will do it with, largely equipment rental. That is niche-y as shit. And I would not have said that in 2016 when I was still working for a corporation. But those properties have done really well for me. And I consider myself having an edge if I were buying or selling.
So, Ian, what's FOMO?
Fear of missing out.
So the most important thing you need to do if you're going to not feel like you're missing out is understand that it's okay to have the feeling of something's happening without me. When Ian talks to me about stocks, or Ian talks to me about industrials, or when Alistair talks to me about distressed Russian precious metals, like everybody, he does. He's a fucking commodity trader.
Yeah,
he looks at it.
Commodity guy. He loves that stuff. Yeah.
He loves it.
Yeah.
And I have this initial reaction. I need to get into that. And in my 20s or 30s, or I talk to my dad still thinks he needs to get into it. And I had a conversation with my dad on the couch. I go, Dad, you went to work every day. You've done incredibly well. You saved millions of dollars. You have it all invested. Now you get a return. Most of it's invested with me. You get a return that pays you and Mom. You don't have to go to work. And you will continue to because it's his solace. But he doesn't have to because he's got enough, reinvested it, and every 6 months they put another chunk in, and they just keep getting return on it. But what I have to figure out for me is when does it make sense to stray and when does it not? And I don't know if I've ever told you this statistic, and this is probably a bit skewed, but I'll use it anyways. I graduated college in 1998, and I had $4,500 to my name. And I've reinvested every nickel I've had over and over and over. Do you know what my annualized return is on that $4,500?
No.
37,000%. Not bad. So you can figure out how to work if you know how to do that. But the point of the matter is I have said no to a ton of really interesting things. And I have a watch collection. I have a car collection. I have a shitty house collection in Richmond, Virginia. But I've gotten really, really specific on it, and that's where I put it. And every now and again, if I choose to put something into something else, I have a small baseball card collection. I have a small wine collection. Those are more hobbies. But my point is, like, during the course of this, everything I go to is to get better at doing this. And there could be bolt-ons or little things that I do. Like I went to a conference 6 weeks ago in Austin, Texas, that's related around this, but it's mostly for people who want to become lenders. I don't know if I want to become a lender. Maybe I do. But at the same time, it's related to what I do. And it's just one tangent or two tangents away from what I currently do. And I could use all of my same infrastructure to add. And that's how I stay focused on what I want to grow into, because the return has been good enough for me.
You also have a nice collection of layered outfits that you go.
Shackets. I have my shacket collection is now 3.
I think I might have you beat on the shackets, but mine are true shackets. I don't wear them to spruce things up like that. Hey, are we, speaking of all of this investment, are we going to find a really good podcast conference to go to that is in Vegas next year, maybe
around May 20 something?
Speaking of investing in ourselves, do we think we could get a nice return for the Let Me Speak to a Manager podcast by?
So the difference is
maybe
this,
a nice FBT next year.
A little fake business trip. So yeah. The good news is this: I've already started dieting for the pool. Back in the old days, you needed about 60 to 90 days. Now you need 6 to 9 months to not look like a whale. So I have already started in preparation of your May birthday.
Just go buy some of those fishing hoodies and tell people that you've got skin cancer, and
basically just, like Luke, go to the pool dressed like Luke Combs.
Long sleeve, little hoodie, wear it in the pool, and tell people you got I had a little spot on my shoulder I'm trying to deal with. You'll be fine.
All right, let's put a wrap on this baby.
I thought I just did, but you can go ahead and try to do better than I did.
Please subscribe and like it.
Please mash that Please mash that like button if you haven't. Oh, by the way, thank you to Rob B for giving us a nice 5-star comment on Apple Podcasts. He received himself a nice little large "Let Me Speak to a Manager" premium cotton T-shirt. Good merch, beautiful merch.
Jersey quality.
And give us a 5-star comment. We'll invest in you, Frankie. Good to see you.
Always a pleasure, buddy.